Welcome to the Sales Compensation Show, where we share the latest sales performance insights through in-depth discussion with experts. Season 3 of our show is your backstage pass to discovering how today's most successful sales and revenue ops teams support go-to-market strategy and improve sales performance. Plus, we'll explore what we can learn about incentives from different industries more broadly. Subscribe to hear how leaders are unlocking new growth, implementing the latest compensation trends, and their priorities for improving go-to-market performance. I'm your host, CEO of Forma.ai, Nabeil Alazzam. Gavin, it's so awesome to have you on the show. I know we have had a lot of discussions over the years, been on roundtables together, talked about sales comp in practice and theory, operations, etc. It's been amazing having all those dialogues, and I've taken a lot from our conversation. So super excited to have you on the show with us today.
Great to be here. It's like we've been old friends. I think we've been talking for about 4 years, and you've been trying to persuade me to join this session. So finally, we're here.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always walked away taking little tidbits of interesting kind of thoughts and perspectives. The ice stream and kind of as an example, kind of like really shaping how you craft and communicate a comp plan. And I've taken a lot away. And I'm super excited to bring that to life for the audience listening today. But without further ado, I can't start any episode without getting into how the heck did you end up in this crazy space of sales comp.
Yeah. It's funny because every episode you listen to, everybody comes up with like the wildest stories as to how they got there. And I think I've got an interesting journey as well. Not many people know this, but I used to be a landscape painter before I even started to work. And then tried to get into the Ruskin School of Art in Oxford. And they basically said I'm too young. So I was like, no, not accepting this. So off I went and I said, okay, I'm going to go and start a career in business. Ended up starting to work for a commercial vehicle company. And then basically got into a bunch of IT roles in a couple of different companies, including the advertising agency for Nike and Coca-Cola. And then thought, this isn't right. What am I doing in IT operations? I can't code anything. I can't keep anything up and running. So went off and did my MBA and then joined BMC shortly afterwards. So then I gradually went through different roles in sales operations. Then I started running order services. And then the comp person quit. And my boss came around to me and he said, hey, why don't you do sales comp? And I was like, okay, sure. How can I help? He said,
doesn't sound like a trap. Yeah.
No, not at all. Not at all. I said, well, yeah, I can do that. I'd love to do that. It sounds like interesting. And I wanted to change my career. And he said, well, great. Well, we're about to go live with a new system. So I said, okay, great. Just tell me when I need to start. And he was like, how about in about 30 days? So that's how I ended up starting in sales comp. It was an interesting twist.
Yeah, and it was perfect, right? You got handed the role and everything is great. Day one?
Yeah, actually, it was more like day -1 when they asked me to join a go live call. They were literally swapping out their system, their entire comp system. This was about 10 plus years ago now. So I was like, okay, sat on the call and everyone's going, yeah, we're going live. And you're looking around and say, everybody ready? Yep, everyone's ready. So we went live and, the first payroll was due that month. So we had 15 days. So now I'm into, day 1 of it. Day 15 comes, payroll's getting prepared. We send it all out. And then the whole thing explodes. Everybody's telling us they're paid wrong. Yep. And I'm like going, but it worked. It produced the payroll file. What's wrong? And it just snowballed from there. It was, let's just say it was one of the more spectacular fails I've ever heard of. And so I was basically 20 days in with the whole sales organization being paid wrong. So a little bit nerve-wracking to say the least.
Yeah. I mean, this is where it is people's pay and it's their livelihood. So you get the frustration because people's lives are ultimately depending on this payout. And if it's incorrectly calculated, it's tough. And I also think that the one other thing that, we've talked about this, in the past too, but it's like the disparity of the complexity or the perception of complexity is very large. Because if you're a sales rep, and you're like, hey, I closed these 5 deals or whatever, these 10 deals this month. How hard is it to take the 10 deals and just calculate the commission? It's a simple multiplication. My grade 5 child at home can figure this out. And yet
exactly.
The problem is that when you're on the other side and doing it for all thousands of sellers, figuring out which 5 or 10 transactions is not easy. And there's a whole bunch of these. So like, I guess, like, how did you unravel this mess? Because obviously you're handed this thing that was done before your time. And
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I say is it was a long process, right? It literally took 18 months to ultimately unravel it. So you imagine I'm at day 15, day 20 at this point, not knowing I have 18 months of fun and games ahead of me. I think the first of all, you have to approach it in a very structured manner, right? But the scary thing I think that people don't realize is that when you changed the entire platform for people. You have people in your team who were literally experts or masters in what they did. And overnight, you've taken 80% of that knowledge
Yeah.
and you have basically put it in the bin. And
Yeah.
so now all these people, and sure, you can put as many training programs as you like, but I mean, you'll hear me maybe a bit later. We can dive into, topics around how do you develop skills, but it takes about 10,000 hours for somebody to get really good at something, right?
Yeah.
And now you've taken that 10,000 hours and you said, now start at hour zero again.
Yeah.
So they're trying to work
Yeah.
their way.
5 work years. 5 work
Yeah, five
years.
work years.
Yeah. Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. 5 years before you get really good. It's like muscle memory as
Yeah.
opposed to really having to think about it. So it was basically getting down to real basic, simple things like, okay, where's the problem? What's the problem? What's triggering this that you had to go through? It's incredibly simple things. And I mean, I was literally having to learn the system quicker than the team already had because, people had to get paid correctly. And, the longer you took, the more problems that came up. And it's not just once it goes wrong, it's unraveling everything. And you're talking about millions and millions of dollars in companies of large scale that's going out the doors. So it's quite nerve-wracking.
Yeah. Millions of dollars in very like the liability on the risk of
Yeah,
in terms of lawsuits and that scale of things is significant. It's not
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, again, I think what I would say to people is it's funny when you get down to the issues that people come into. I'd say there's really only three things that you actually have to look at when somebody says, "Hey, I've got a problem." It's either the transaction amount is wrong, the quote credit amount is wrong, or the earnings amount is wrong. And depending on which one of those three things it is, you can go and diagnose and fix the problem, right?
Yeah.
The problem is when you get this on a scale of 1,000 people, 100,000 transactions,
Yeah.
it starts to get very, very complicated. And then you're trying to figure out like, where did it all go wrong, right? And funnily enough, it was nothing to do with the system. It was nothing to do with the comp plan design. It was everything to do with assuming what people meant when they said something. So in our case, the most simplistic way, they wanted them to get paid on the territory their reps had, not the roll up of the reps. And I think everyone in the sales comp world will go, oh yeah, I know what that means. Basically,
Yep.
because there's gaps in headcount and so forth. And so credits aren't rolling and flowing. Unraveling all of that was, a long process. And of course, everyone's impatient. But guess what? You only get one fix per month, right? You can fix a lot of things, but you have to run through a cycle. And so, the aha moment, which I just talked about, which is where we figured out really what was going wrong. I was actually at a wedding. I was sat the night before the wedding in the reception venue, sitting there, and I was on my laptop looking up at the ceiling, and there were a whole bunch of like paper cranes that the bride and groom had made for the wedding, whilst on a conference call with our IT team, with some other people, going, how do we solve it? And it was like you just like look up and you're going, oh, I think it's this. And
Yeah.
everyone's like going, yeah. And so again, it's strange situations and memories that you have from these things
Yeah.
because
It's
it's
like
full
ingrained in
on.
your head. That's
I
those cranes are
never
never going
forget that
away.
moment.
Yeah.
Never forget that moment because it was like, you're sitting there with your laptop on your lap and it leans up and everyone's going, what's that on the ceiling? And you go, I know what it is.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's, classic stuff that you remember afterwards.
I mean, those moments in life, yeah, like they're obviously very impactful, and it was a turning point, right? It's like
Mhm.
for getting things back on in control and kind of taking over, and in that recovery point, because you're right, you get one monthly cycle to course correct and kind of get things righted, and hopefully you do it all at once. But like, what was the situation of getting that trust back from the sales force? I imagine that's also a big part of
Yeah.
the challenges then going forward.
Okay, so August was when we realized what had gone wrong. We'd gone live basically in June. So we were basically in month three at that point. It took another 3 months. So we were basically October, November, and things were starting to pay correctly. Or at least, we were ironing out most of the problems at that point. But again, at that point, then you're moving into, for us, we have an April fiscal year. So we were just starting the planning cycle for the next year. And so, it took a while to really get through that. And in all honesty, and again, not what you want on day one of your job, but your credibility is totally destroyed,
Yeah.
right? So honestly, it probably took 2 more years to start to get credibility back because, like I said, you go live the next following year, and everyone is staring at you, just waiting for it to go wrong again. And so it really does take time to earn trust back. And only at that point, once you start paying people correctly, do actually people, start to believe in you. I mean, plan design is great. And, we've talked a lot about plan design, in these episodes. But if you can't get the operational action of paying people correctly month after month and resolving issues month after month, your plan design is is nice, but the field's not going to be motivated by that. They're more motivated by is the paycheck right in in my inbox.
It's table stakes. It truly is
Yeah.
foundationally. If you don't have that, it's such a big distraction. If people are not getting paid, that
Hmm.
it doesn't really matter what the plan is. They don't have confidence they're actually gonna get paid on anyways.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the plan design discussion was more like we're not changing anything because if we do, it may go wrong again. So, and then this is where, you get the expression, the tail's wagging the dog coming
Mhm,
up, which is, what do you mean the comp team is driving how we want to remunerate and reward our reps? And it's a horrible position to be in because that's the
yeah,
last thing you want to be doing. You want to
100%.
be,
Yeah.
so,
I mean, it's interesting because it came up recently where, like, if you think about if you are in a position as, in your personal life, you are buying something from it, you see these offers that like sign up and you get this. And then
hmm
if you're like in your head, oh my God, doing that, the headache of, dealing with customer support because I'm probably going to be billed wrong or whatever, you're just not going to do it.
hmm
Right? It's not even worth the
hmm
discount or the opportunity. Like, it's just not worth it. And it's the same
no,
thing happens in sales if you don't get the operational side correct.
yeah,
Because it's like, well, yeah, okay, I guess I get this kicker if I do this, but they're never going to catch it correctly. I'm going to spend hours with the comp team trying to figure it out. So losing that trust is
yeah,
absolutely,
yeah. Well,
yeah.
and you
So
have to give them the visibility. And I mean, again, that's where a
yeah,
huge amounts changed in 10 years within, the systems and the tools that we have available, right? But you have to make it transparent for the field because they also don't trust you if it's a little black box and they can't figure out how they're being paid. They
100%.
want to see the calculation
Yeah,
beginning to end, which totally normal. And thank goodness the tools have advanced so much in the last 10 years that that's getting easier and easier. It's still not easy, but it's certainly
yeah.
getting better.
I mean, yeah, it's a complex problem, but I find also the transparency side, and especially the legacy solutions in the past, and in terms of like the approach that was taken was very much we need to provide transparency to the calculation.
Yeah.
But providing transparency to the crediting logic is just
Hmm.
as important. Like, hey, these
Oh
are the
yeah.
transactions that you are getting credit for, and these are the transactions that you might be seeing in the CRM, but you're not getting credit for X, Y, and Z reasons on these.
Yeah.
Is just as relevant because that's typically when we see and we look at kind of existing systems and the beginning of an implementation for us, it's very easy to spot the disputes that are coming in for crediting logic questions or, why am I not getting credit on this deal? Why is it not falling into this category and bucket? And that part is not easy to provide transparency on because it's complex business rules that are tailored, very
Yeah.
specific to the organization. So,
Yeah. And we're masters at, designing complex crediting, right? I will raise my hand as being one of the guilty party in
yeah,
doing this, right? And the more complex that is, then the more important it is to, help people understand how that crediting works.
yeah,
And obviously, as companies get bigger and they have more business units and they, pay in different ways, that, providing that transparency becomes more and more important every time.
yeah, 100%. So you've got this operational side, kind of humming. You've gotten it going, and you think about that communication and that building that trust with the sales organization. I think it happens in two ways, right? You build the credibility over time as
Yeah.
you continue executing, but there is also something around, getting everyone to be on board. I feel the communication at the beginning of the year, any changes. And I remember in that the recent roundtable that we had where, you brought up what I think is a very interesting story for many reasons, but the
Hmm.
mosaic story
Yeah.
that you shared, and I think it's very relevant to, you
Yeah.
know, you need to get that buy-in from the organization and you need to be able to communicate a certain way. So yeah, would love if you could share it with the
Yeah,
audience.
sure, sure. So first of all, I have to give credit to the person who actually came up with the mosaic story, which is our CRO, which was Jason Andrew. Admittedly, we built it together, but it was really his original idea, so I can't claim full ownership of it. But basically, what happened was we were doing a fairly significant plan change. And, so we decided to get the entire sales leadership team together at the sales kickoff event in a room to explain the plan changes. And Jason and I were chatting away and we were going like, how are we going to convince these guys about this plan change? And, what are they going to say? And you start going through like either what ifs, they're not going to like this, they're going to like that. And then Jason said, I know, let's talk about it like a mosaic because everybody wants all the good bits. Nobody wants the bad bits. So they'll be really excited about these high-end accelerator tables that they can earn lots of money, but they're not going to like the limiting of crediting in this space or that space. So he basically said, we're going to call it a mosaic. And I'm going to tell these guys that if they want the plan, they have to take the whole mosaic picture. They can't pick and choose. You can't take tiles out the mosaic and it still work. It only works when all the tiles are in there together. And since he started that conversation, every time a sales manager, yeah, but you go, Frank, you just took a tile out the mosaic there. You can't do that, right?
Yeah.
And and it was like an hour and a half of this session going on where they were trying to pick holes and holes and holes. And this is where you have such great support from your sales leadership when it's like I'm there just to back him up in explaining this, but he was like, no, wait, just stop. That's another mosaic tile you just took off. Put it back.
Yeah.
So it was, and you can use it in all sorts of different ways along the, whether it's running your operations, whether it's designing a plan. So
It truly is a very good capturing of the complexity of comp
yeah.
design. On its own, this clause or this term looks weird, and it's like, well,
Hmm.
like if we just change that, and I agree, this comes up so often, but it's that story articulates very well that we're getting so much over here because of our ability
Yeah.
to unlock the financial outcomes from this one little term. And so, if you want
Yeah.
this, you got to have this, and it's a good way. And the fact that now he just, he can reference remember
Yeah.
Mosaic, and now it just brings that back is genius in terms of getting a sales, leadership team across the board bought into a plan change. So
But let's be honest, right? It's not like they don't go and still try and change the mosaic behind the scenes afterwards. They
no,
may get through that, but it's certainly the good starting point for
yeah.
that, right? I mean,
I
the
mean,
other one I've also used in a similar light is like when we run working group sessions, we've done it with the salespeople. And you talk about any topic and they say, okay, no, let's double the new logo bonus or let's do this or that. And I say, okay, that's great. But you're only allowed to ask me to do that if you tell me what you're giving me back in return. And,
yeah,
and you just see people pause when you say that. What do you mean I have to give you? Well, it's a zero sum game. I don't
yeah,
get more
yeah. This is
money.
the budget. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And all of a sudden they get this better appreciation. And I found that very useful because then they go back and they go, I've heard them, sat on the sort of sidelines, but listening to when some of their reps are talking to them going, yeah, yeah, but what about this? And they're like, hey, if we did that, then we would have to take this back from you. So
yeah.
it is a trade-off discussion, and the mosaic story is great as well in supporting that.
Of course, the sales team's going to negotiate. I mean, if the sales rep or team is not negotiating their quota and their comp plan, then they're likely not going to be negotiating good
Yeah,
deals externally, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
so, 100%. So, as you took over and you started from, I remember, hearing your story of taking over and that
Hmm.
first, year and how grueling it was and to kind of get it to the steady state operations that
Yeah.
you were running. But, I think you've come on this incredible journey and obviously, the guidance or, career advice that you have and how you take over and actually scale and grow and develop careers in sales comp. Obviously would love to have you share that with the audience.
Wow. I mean, I'm a very sort of methodical, logical, process orientated person. So whenever I have something, I try and turn it into a system of some shape or form, right? As well about, my own career, I'll try and sort of how can I get there and standardize it. So the first thing within, let's say from a functional perspective is you have to develop a system that you're operating at within your team, right? You have to break it into its component parts, whether that be plan design, territories and quota systems, reporting, issues, and so forth, right? But if I think about it more then from a personal development standpoint, you have to make sure that you're in the right place,
Yep.
right? There's two things that I think you can do very simplistically. One of them is you can do some of those assessments that tell you where your strengths are. The one I'd recommend is Clifford Strengths from Gallup. That's, like, I don't know, 50, $70 or something. And it'll tell you what you're good at, right? Because if you start to put yourself into a role that your strengths aren't matched to,
Yep.
it's an eternal fight, right? You're not going to be happy. So the first thing is you got to look a little bit internally on yourself and say, am I in the right place, right? The second one is another, sort of thing where you need to learn how to handle different types of people, profiles, right? Because there's another great one which one of my bosses told me is you are Switzerland in this role, right?
Yeah.
And you have no allegiance to anybody. I love the conversation where we get into this whole thing like where should sales comp report? It doesn't matter, right? You don't belong to anybody. You belong to the company, and you have to be very neutral in your perspective because you have to represent the interests of HR, finance, sales,
Yep.
legal at times, right? So you where your report's irrelevant, you just have to remember that you have to represent them all to the best of your ability,
Yep.
right?
The best outcome for the business. Yep. Yep.
So the quicker you can learn to handle different profiles, the one I did was something called insights profiles or the color profiles. Some
Yep.
people know them. It's very simple to then, identify your different stakeholders and what personality type they are, so you can adjust how you work with them. That's a massive, massive advantage. I wish I'd learned it at the beginning of my career rather than halfway through my career. So if people want to develop, strongly recommend that. Strongly recommend something like the Gallups. And then the one I've just done is Simon Sinek's Finding Your Why, right? Which is a little bit more deep and insightful, where you try and figure out who you are and what makes you tick. And apparently, it's already defined when you're a teenager, which is a little bit scary. So I went through that, and that was also pretty good because it came back and it basically said I'm the guy who wants to share his knowledge and experience so that others can succeed, right? Which for me put me in a great position because I love to learn something like sales comp or even a tiny little aspect of sales comp or AI or whatever
Yeah.
and share that with people because it's about them getting further forward, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, those are a few of the things around development and things I've appreciated through the years.
The stakeholder management of sales comp,
Mm,
that is such a tough one
yeah,
to nail and get right because the easy path is to concede on some things in the moment with certain stakeholders, but in reality, there comes a big price, whether it's legal ramifications in the
yeah,
future or the financial, the risks of a plan can seriously overpay if you don't design it properly and push back on
hmm,
the sales organization in the right way. So that part is critical. And I think your point on having a really good understanding of the different profiles at play so that you can tweak and adjust how you communicate things to better understood. I mean, I think that's a critically important skill set in any role,
yeah,
but especially in sales
yeah,
comp when you're
yeah,
doing that. And then I think the why, the purpose why I think this goes way beyond just sales comp. I think it's powerful to know what gives you satisfaction because it's
yeah,
not easy, right? Like if you're working this hard at this at the corporate level, it's you want to be able to take away and feel kind of good about it. Having known you for a while now and
hmm,
engaging your team and everything, it's very obvious to see that you have brought this like curation and kind of like feedback mechanism to the people that you work with and that
yeah.
learning and development. I guess how would you think about scaling teams and building out that side of sales comp function?
Well, I think when you start to scale the team, you have to develop a common language, right? Everybody has to be on the same page. So there's a few things that you can do. Obviously, you know, uh, I start with very simple things. Whenever I meet a team, it's a little pep talk, right? Which basically goes something along the lines of, "You may hate me at times, but just tell me, right? I'm going to push you, but I want and I expect you to push me just as much, right?" And then the second thing is make sure that they understand as you grow as a team that you're there for them, right? So for me, it's always about, I define success with my team as when we have work-life balance, right? We may or we may not have it at this point in time, but there's going to be times when those things get out of whack. But at the end of the day, that's what we're there to do. Sure, we got to deliver a specific business result, but we've got to deliver it in a way that's a sustainable. So as you grow a team, it has to be sustainable, right? And then the next thing is when you're talking about problems, you need to have a common language. So, I mean, I use problem solving and decision making from Kettner Trigo as the language that I try and use as a common language to talk about problems so that then when you come into a meeting, everyone can talk about it in the same way. So, the quicker that you can establish a more common language to how you
Yeah.
talk about things, the easier you'll be because then when somebody else comes in and as your teams grow, you're all sort of working together and with that common language of communication.
Yep, 100%. And I think it not only makes you more efficient in terms of how you work together, but it
Yeah.
also enables you to further establish and build the culture of working
Yeah.
together as a team and create
Yeah.
that. I guess from a perspective of how you have developed and kind of the resources that you've used to kind of both develop your own career, but also develop those that are around you. I guess like any
Mhm.
feedback or suggestions there?
Books, 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 right? I mean, it's really, really unfair in sales comp. It is a profession, but it's not a profession. It's not like you can go to follow the medic sales process and negotiating skills, and there's this whole list of sales comps courses you can do. Sure, there's some great ones that are offered at places like World at Work, Alexander Group around, designing comp plans, but there's almost nothing around running sales comp, right? And the
Yep.
different aspects of that. So I spend a lot of my time digesting, reading books. I think the generation of today have a totally unfair advantage because AI is huge at the moment in this space. I've now become a closet conversationalist with my AI bots. I'll give you an example, which I think you know about, right? Which is I have taken every single one of your podcasts.
Yep.
I've loaded them into Notebook LM. So I have more than 70 podcasts loaded into Notebook LM, which I can query at any point in time on
Yep.
any topic that anybody has discussed in the podcast. That never existed 10 years ago.
Yeah, no, it's
And
the ability to compress information into very, digestible formats is, I mean, it's the same thing that happened with the
it's
web coming out. It's kind of the next shift. Yeah.
it's unbelievable. But it's hugely valuable. And I mean, I'll give you an example from my wife recently, who was dealing with a situation at work, and I said, "Well, just describe to the chat system what that situation is, see what it comes back." And you'd be surprised how good a answers it comes back. So what I would say is, today you have a coach at your fingertips to ask any question to, any advice to, and you can get that thing. So the development opportunities these days are so much bigger. Sure, specialized in sales comp is a little bit weaker, but you can get so far in them.
Yeah.
Even to the point of the books, you can sort of help them synthesize some of the material from books that you're reading or articles that you're reading. So I would say that's definitely the biggest thing, and I think people are still a bit frightened of this, and they're still not trying it enough. The danger is you do what I do and you go down the black hole so far that you wonder if you're ever going to come out of it. But that's the huge one I think at the moment.
Yeah. You just have to bake it into everything
Yeah.
that you do, and it's, I mean,
Ask
yeah,
it to write your sales comp policy. Have you ever
yeah,
tried?
that's a good,
I've literally asked it to recently to, give me what's the structure of a sales comp policy? What
yeah,
about this clause? It comes back with things or a set, standard operating procedure. There's so many things that you could, learn from. What it is you have to be creative in how you're asking your questions to it to get something valuable out.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, yeah, it's a good synthesizer. Like when, original search engines came out, I mean, you searched the web and you found information, didn't mean that you're just copying pasting that, right? Like you
Yeah.
took that, it became an input into your that last mile, right, of kind of delivery. So taking a little shift, I know that you recently went on a bike tour across
Hmm.
UK,
Yeah.
the Jog,
Yeah.
and I'm curious, what has stepping away for that, kind of an extended period of time to go do something totally outside, and then now coming back, any lessons or any insights that you think worth sharing?
Yeah, I mean, so for those who don't know, the jog stands for Land's End to John O'Groats, right? And it's literally going from the bottom left-hand corner of England to the top right-hand corner of Scotland, and it's about 1,000 miles or 1,600 kilometers when you do it. Um, what did it teach me? It's a bit like that day one experience, is that you prepare and you think you're perfectly ready, and then you step on that bike and you cycle out the door on the first day, and it's horrific, right? You totally underestimated what you were getting into. It's like this total shock, right? So literally, this trip was a little bit like reliving that to a certain degree, and
Yeah,
you thought you were ready, you weren't. You then start to sort of break things down. It was pouring with rain, going up and down hills on the first couple of days. You thought you could cover 100 kilometers. You're doing like 50 to 70 and struggling. What you do is you start to break it down. You see it just like any other problem. Okay, I need to break this down into smaller chunks, bite-sized chunks. Okay, so tomorrow we're going to do 75 kilometers. 75 kilometers is going to be broken into different segments of 75 kilometers. And you just, even sometimes when you get the really, really big hills, you're going to go, okay, I'm going to do 100 meters, and then I'm going to do the next 100 meters, and so really breaking it down into smaller bite-sized things. It was very much every single day taking the lesson from the last day. How are we going to apply this differently? There's all sorts of weird things that you don't realize, like you're going to, there's an expression called bonking, which is when you run out of energy because you didn't eat enough in time to
yeah,
feed the next level of energy thing. So you even have to change your diet. And again, when you do a journey like that, you have a huge amount of time to reflect. But when I was on the trip, I was going, well, what am I going to do next? I mean, okay, I'm doing this. This is great. And, that's when I started thinking about, well, what did I really want to do? And honestly, it's about giving back a little bit more into the
yeah,
sales comp world. I love the sales comp world and keep wanting to be able to share my experiences, and if you want to call it knowledge, so that other people can do their job better. I think it's weird because in some senses it's quite a protective group because it's so confidential, that getting people together to talk about these things openly, which I mean, again, we do pretty well in the think tank group, right?
yeah, yeah.
But I remember going to so many events and everyone's so guarded as to what they say. Are they going to reveal a secret about their sales comp plan and so forth? So the more I can do to help people bridge that gap is something I'm sort of exploring right now to see how I can do that.
100%. I mean, it's a niche space, but at the same time, it's every company
Yeah.
has sales comp and has a revenue and go-to-market engine that gets supported through, combination of sales ops and sales comp. And I think it's great that, leaders like yourself with your experience, the 10,000 plus hours that are
Hmm.
giving back and sharing
I
with
think it's
others in this.
nearer 30,000 hours now, though.
Yeah. 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 I didn't want to, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's like, yeah, it's what is it, 10 plus years, but I don't think I was really working 8 hour days.
I was going to say, yeah, that's the best part. In some cases, you get thrown into you build
Yeah.
that 10,000 hours pretty quick. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Very quick in in those circumstances.
So shifting gears to the hot take. So
Okay.
you and I have had a lot of discussions
hmm
on this, and you have many hot takes, but I don't know, maybe
hmm
if you want to pick one and we'll
hmm
double click into that.
Sure. I don't know whether it's a pet peeve, attainment data, the misuse of attainment data, the misunderstanding of attainment data. I think everybody probably in the sales comp world, who's listening to this has had someone come up to them and say, "Hey, can you send me the attainment data, please?" And some people will just send them attainment data. But I can't tell you how dangerous and how many mistakes people make when they do that. An example is attainment data that's used for compensation costing is totally different than attainment data that's used for club qualification, right?
Yeah,
Club qualification is who's still employed right this point in time. Are they active? Are they not active? Did they hit the number of the target that's required for club or not? Right. And even that, by the way, is really complicated because what happens if someone has two positions in a year? What happens
yeah,
if a new hire
exactly.
joins? There's so many different modifiers to this data. Whereas costing, people leave the company. You can't ignore people who've left the company because guess what? Next year, that's going to probably happen too. So
Yeah,
your attainment profile has to include the people who've terminated as well as the people who are in position. And you can go down every single different level. And the problem is that people say, can you send me the attainment data? And people will send them without actually understanding what it's going to be used for. And it will be totally different, the result that I would send somebody based on the use that they actually have.
yeah.
And, it's like, I'm going to say, what is it? The make miss must be 60/40 or 50/50 or whatever it is. Based on what?
Yeah.
So that's my, I don't know if it's my hot take. My recommendation is whenever somebody asks you for any data, especially attainment data, ask them what they're using it for, and then
Yeah.
really challenge yourself to say, is this going to give them the answer they need, or is it going to give them the wrong answer if I give them this, right? Remember, people's careers can be ruined with this data. It can mean hiring and firing when you're going through a cost reduction exercise in a company, or when people are looking for top talent to put into different roles. So you have to be really, really mindful what you're doing with it.
Yeah. There's a lot of data that has context beyond just the output, right? Like, it's not readable
Yeah,
from the output that in sales comp, you have. And so I think getting the clarification of like the purpose, the use case, and you can proactively build out these different cuts of data for different use cases and then have them
yeah,
ready. And so
yeah,
it's not about like, oh, you can't prepare information to share beforehand, but because I agree with you, it's very different if you're providing it for finance to financially model, to kind of forecast versus sales leadership and making business decisions on,
yeah.
people and where they should go. And
Let me give you an example of how I personally messed up with this right in the past, right? For the costing exercise, somebody said to me, hey, can you give me the sales attainment by role? So account manager, specialist, and so forth. And, I need it for multiple years so that we can
yeah,
make sure that we get an average over the years because one year may not be the right year to look at. So two mistakes happen in that process. The first thing is we pulled the multi-year data, we sent it, and we started to use it to predict what the cost would be. The first mistake is that if you don't take the historical role of a person, and you will represent, if somebody's had three roles, let's say
yeah,
they were a BDR, an account manager, and then a specialist, and you're just using their current role, you're going to use the attainment of the BDR in the history of the specialist.
yeah.
And, as we all know, the roles are perfectly named year over year. There's no mapping that's required, even if the data was clean, but you still have to pull the right attainment by role if it's for role. And then the second problem with the attainment data when you're using for costing purposes is the performance in the year was the performance in the year. Maybe it was 105% one year and 95% the next year.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
but now if I'm using it for costing, I'm not costing at 95 or 100. I'm costing it when we hit target at 100%. So you then have to normalize that
Normalize it.
data.
Yeah.
And it sounds so obvious, but I can almost guarantee that everyone makes the mistake at least once, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't actually realize, that I have to make that adjustment until you've been taught it, right?
The actual attainment percentage does not change. Again, it's how you're using it, and there's context that is either available to you in the system or requires some pre-work, whether it's again like
Yep.
mapping old roles
Yep.
to what the new definition of that role is.
hmm
But that context doesn't sit in that percentage on its own. You have to kind
No.
of capture it, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of prep work. And I think this is where it's like, if you, from an operations perspective, if you think about these things and you build out a system to be able to track these things over time and
Yep.
effective data all these changes, then you could pre-prepare the different cuts of that data for different use cases. But yeah, if you don't ask what the context is, you don't know which data set
Yep.
to share, et cetera. So no, I
But
definitely
so often everything is geared around the CRM system.
yes, which
And
is a point in
which
time. It's a
point
point
in
in time
time
system.
only. It's point in
Yeah,
time system. And so they optimize everything for that point in time system.
yeah,
And all the backup data linked to that typically is point in time,
yeah,
right? So you have to realize you have to start to become a data steward in your job.
yeah,
And you have to start to champion, building a data warehouse or whatever it is, data repository that is useful for sales compensation. Don't rely on the rest of the organization to do it for you,
yeah.
right? And they're not going to understand it like you understand it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think again, this goes back to like it is a data challenge. It is a data problem in sales comp, and I think makes it much more difficult. But if you set it up properly, it can be tremendously valuable for the business because there is no data source in most enterprises that covers exactly what you're talking about, which is that
Yeah.
truly effective dated visual representation of what has occurred in the last 5 to 10 years in the go-to-market. It's all point-in-time systems that don't capture this. To wrap up, the show here, are there any books that have helped shape and kind of drive your career to date, and any that at least you want to share with the audience?
The first one I would say is The New Rational Manager by Kepner Trigo. That one's all about problem solving and decision making in a very structured approach. If you can instill that discipline across your team, you'll have a common language to work on problems, and it'll help you way beyond just sales comp. It can, you can take it wherever you go. Another one is a book called It's Not Luck by Goldratt. It's more of a story book. It's kind of fun. Then two last ones, I would go Diagnosing the System for Organization by a guy called Stafford Beer. He was a professor of mine at university, a professor in cybernetics, and he had this model for how organizations should operate. It's difficult to get hold of the book, I'll be honest with you, but it's fascinating. It's probably one of those ones where you need to maybe be on holiday and be in deep thinking mode to read. Don't go for a light read of that one.
Yeah.
And then the final one, Bounce by Matthew Said.
Yeah.
Matthew Said was a table tennis player in the UK, and it's all about that concept of 10,000 hours of training,
Yeah.
and how, is talent born or is it made? Spoiler alert, it's not born. Okay, you have to put
Yeah.
time and energy into it. And probably the key point in that book is also it's not just about doing 10,000 hours, it's doing purposeful 10,000 hours.
10,000 is yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
but it's
Yeah.
showing up to training and not just training, but thinking about what you're training.
Yeah. It's another, yeah, great author. And another one of his books that I've really I really enjoyed too is the Black Box
Yeah.
Thinking. I'm gonna now try to find Diagnosing the System for Organizations. I think
Yeah.
that one sounds very intriguing to me. So yeah. On to the second question. So within the industry of sales comp, sales ops, is
Hmm.
there anyone that you'd want to take out to lunch
Hmm.
and kind of pick their brain, get their input, feedback?
In the industry, Rick Butler, the guy gives so much back to
100%.
the collective group. He's fascinating. He's very thoughtful about what he says. Love to pick his brains. If I went outside of the industry and more just people I'd love to go and have lunch with, Stephen Bartlett. He does the Diary of the CEO. He's always, got some interesting guests. It's interesting when you start not just about who who he talks to, but if you start to study what he does, he's so purposeful, so analytical about what he does. I'd love to get some time with him. And if I gave you a third one, Simon Sinek, runs the Optimist company, thought leader. I find him inspiring, right? I
Yeah.
just love what he does.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. 100%. Well, no, I think as you shared earlier, giving back and kind of taking all that experience and that hard work and the mistakes that ultimately lead to that knowledge and experience that you kind of overcome, I think giving back and tremendously appreciate it. I think for everyone that's
mhm.
starting their career and kind of in the middle of fighting these the battles that come with being in the world of sales comp and sales ops, I certainly agree. Rick Butler has shared and been, I mean, just as you have
Yeah.
on our webinars and kind of part of the community that we're building. So just wanted to say thank you again for coming on the show and taking the time to share your feedback. Just for the audience, in case someone wants to reach out, is there what's the best form for them to reach out, get hold of you if they wanted to ask
Yeah.
you anything? Or
The easiest way really is just through LinkedIn. It's just my last name Tapper. So if you just put that
oh
in,
wow, okay, yeah,
I'm literally the Tapper on
LinkedIn, yeah,
LinkedIn. So just reach out if there's anything people want to ask. Happy to help in any way. And for those listening, I just encourage people to participate more in things like this. The think tank. I mean, I've learned so much from these events and continue to. And we're just lucky to have events like this. So join them and take part in them.
well, it wouldn't be possible without people like you and experts and leaders like you coming on and sharing. So thank you so much, Gavin. As always, it's a great discussion and looking
Yeah.
forward to the next one.
Great. Thanks very much, Nabeil.
The Sales Competition Show is brought to you by Forma.ai, the sales performance management platform that fully integrates sales planning with rapid, scalable incentive compensation management. Our data platform brings together how you can plan and manage the entire lifecycle of territories, quotas, and incentives. With global customers like Autodesk, Stryker, and Hootsuite, we enable go-to-market teams to plan and deploy even the most complex SPM strategies at speed, taking you from idea to execution instantly. To learn more about Forma.ai, visit our website at Forma.ai. Hit the subscribe button and find more episodes of the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Thanks for tuning in.